Today is July 11th, 1943. Back in the convalescent company, orders await me to report to the 1st Company of the 1st Battalion of the newly reconstituted division. Our company is currently stationed in Flers, in Normandy. I am one of a group of 14 soldiers, and we are being taken by truck to the railway station. During the next few weeks, we learn discipline. The main part of the work is to do with weapons and field training. Instead of the old MG-34, we now receive the brand new MG-42, which has the much higher rate of fire, 1,000 rounds a minute, and is far less susceptible to cold, wet conditions and dirt. Because of our earlier training, my friends and I are assigned to the company's heavy weapons platoon, and the company is again up to strength. While Otto Krupke, a good friend of mine from the convalescent company in Insterberg, Weikert and I get further training on the heavy machine gun. Warius has been assigned to mortars. Our instructors, from the Oberwachtmeister as Zugführer to the Unteroffizier, are almost all experienced frontline soldiers, many of them decorated. The training is hard but not vindictive, as I always accept and carry out to the best of my ability the hard but very worthwhile training on the HMG, which, apart from the firing exercises, includes building gun positions and carting around the heavy mounting and the ammunition boxes. I do not feel any real desire to go out in the evenings. I know from experience how vitally important it is during an emergency to have a trained body and to be able to control your weapon perfectly. I'm convinced that these two things, plus my good luck and God's help, have helped me survive the war so far in one piece. 15th August. It's time to say au revoir to France. No doubt many of the mademoiselles are weeping hot tears through their long eyelashes, but they will probably hanker after one of the many communication stallions and are quite prepared to expand their families. The departing soldier, on the other hand, sticks out his chest so that his medals rattle, assuming there are any to rattle, and reflects that a hot-blooded Mediterranean girl wouldn't be so bad after all. Although our destination is top secret, the rumor mill points in the direction of Italy. General Badoglio has assumed control of the government there and has arrested Mussolini, and there are concerns that he will pull out of the German-Italian axis. This is exactly what happens. First, we go by rail to Landeck in the Tyrol, and from there by truck to Meran. The welcome given to us by the local population is indescribable. It's as if everyone is having a party. The tarpaulin over the back of our truck bed is rolled up because of the heat. We wave from the vehicles and are nearly drenched in sweets, chocolate, fruit, wine, and huge quantities of flowers. We can only advance at walking pace, and hundreds of people are running alongside us, stretching their hands up to touch ours. Otto even lifts one beauty into the truck, and she goes from one to the other of us, kissing us intimately. She tells us that we are the very first German troops seen in southern Tyrol for 25 years. They fear the threatening storm clouds, and we gather that the population in southern Tyrol would be happy to be annexed to Germany. We stop overnight in Meran and join the population feasting well into the night. 31st August. The situation here in Italy becomes more and more critical every day. We're constantly on alert, but we carry on all the time with our field exercises. We sweat like pigs in our field gray uniforms. The Italian population is openly criticizing Mussolini, who has apparently done everything wrong. The word is that Badoglio has opened peace negotiations with the Allies and wants to dissolve the pact Italy had with us. 3rd September. We get our tropical uniforms at last, and we feel like holiday makers. The light uniforms look good, khaki-colored shirts and shorts, to help us cope with the unusually hot conditions. British troops are said to have landed in southern Italy and to be moving north from Sicily. There are rumors going around that we might be transferred to Naples. 8th September. The Italian population is told that a peace treaty is in place between Badoglio and the Allies. The war is over for them. Most of the population is jubilant, and as of now, we find ourselves at war with former friends. Our orders are to disarm the Italian troops as quickly as possible. 9/13. September. Our first objective is the barracks in Modena. In the early morning hours, our company commander, with the help of a tank, is able to confuse the Italian commander of the barracks so completely that we are able to take possession of the place, without resistance, in one bold move. We take most of the soldiers by surprise while they are still in their beds. We are amazed that the Italian soldiers sleep in such huge rooms, an advantage from our point of view, because we can win control over them quite easily. After they have been disarmed, they are turned over to an escort unit for onward transport. Then we're off to Bologna, and the next day to the barracks at Pistola, where the operation is repeated. Another rumor says that the Allied invasion can be expected in the Leghorn Via Reggio area. We've been told nothing officially. 14th of September. We set off in a westerly direction and take up a position in a forest between Pisa and Leghorn. We hear that Mussolini has been rescued by German airborne troops and that he has been sent to the Führer's main headquarters. The expected invasion does not materialize. Instead, we are strafed continuously by enemy aircraft, although they cause no damage. The following days are quite pleasant. From the point of view of supplies, we are living a life of luxury. The supply depots which we captured during the disarming of the Italian army are filled to overflowing with all type of foodstuffs. Every day we get quite adequate rations of delightfully tasting grape marmalade, fresh butter, and real mortadella. What's more, we eat crusty Italian white bread and drink delightful wine. Over the following weekends, we visit the Piazza della Signoria in nearby Florence and the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or drive with our squadron commander down to the beach of Leghorn to go swimming. 20th September. Unfortunately, we're being transferred again. First, we drive in a northerly direction over the Apennines, then northeast over Ferrara and Padua, and then along the Adriatic coast towards Trieste. On the way, there are some incidents with partisans, but we suffer only very minor losses. Our motor sergeant has problems with the captured Italian vehicles. So, because I hold all the Army driver's licenses, I am pressed into service. First, I take over a heavy Italian motorcycle and sidecar, though I do not have the pleasure of riding it for long. I quickly get used to the weight of the machine, even though, unlike our motorcycle combinations, it has the sidecar on the left-hand side. During the zigzagging drive through the Apennines, I suddenly have engine trouble and almost disappear into oblivion down a mountain gorge. The problem must have been due to either the carburetor or the ignition, because while sweeping round the bends, the engine would suddenly cut out, and as a result, I would get left behind. When I then, in my annoyance, revved up, the engine suddenly kicked in, and the machine took a giant leap forward. Although I normally would get the runaway motorbike quickly under control, on one very tight right-handed bend I'm no longer able to control it. The machine accelerates over to a retaining wall on the left-hand side of the road, coming to a halt halfway over the edge of the abyss. The Schiermeister helps me push the machine completely over the edge into the gorge so that it will not fall into the hands of the partisans. Hunting partisans in Istria, 21st Panzer Grenadier. Regiment 5 September 11. October 1943. I then take over a Jeep, which initially gives me a lot of trouble. When I drive it, the lightweight vehicle weaves all over the road, and I am just thankful that no one is coming towards me. I'm behind the wheel of a passenger car for the first time. My military driver's licenses, Class 1 and I, were gained on a 5-ton Henschel diesel truck, with rough double-declutching and steering, which could only be done by brute force. So I spend the next quarter of an hour working hard to get used to the foibles of this lightweight go-kart with its sensitive steering wheel, and eventually manage to drive along with the rest of the convoy, to the satisfaction of the motor sergeant. 23 September. We've reached our destination and are spending the whole day in the assembly area. I have to give up my VW Jeep as I'm considered much more important as a machine gunner. 25 September. Our unit and others are hunting down partisans on the Istrian Peninsula. Members of Badoglio's partisan movement have holed themselves up in very difficult and rough terrain, in many cases in caves. Thus we have a physically demanding job to do, most of the time on foot since our vehicles can get around only with difficulty. 27 September. We capture 2 armed partisans and a woman in the houses. They couldn't get away in time. A Feldwebel I do not know wants to shoot them at once, and along with them the few remaining residents of the houses, who insist that they were forced by the partisans to let them use their homes. After a discussion with 2 other Feldwebeln, he agrees to let the residents go free and takes the prisoners along. As we continue on our way, Fritz Hamann and I are the last 2 in the group. The Feldwebel waits with the prisoners for us to catch up. Then he orders us to take them behind the rocks and shoot them. We're totally shocked, and we tell him to find someone else to do job. He gets extremely angry and yells, "That is an official order. Those swine have fired on us and wounded our comrades. They could even have killed them, and we can't drag that riffraff along." He points to the rocks behind us with his submachine gun. "You can do it over there in the gorge," Fritz Hamann now shouts so loudly that his voice echoes from the mountainsides. "Get going, you swine." We force the prisoners off the road and back into the rocky gorge. I look them over as we are walking. In spite of their tans, they look very pale. Perspiration is streaming down their grubby faces, and their eyes have a terrified stare. They're afraid because they can sense what our Feldwebel has ordered us to do. I know terror in its many variations from my fighting in Russia, but his must be worse, because they can see no escape. The youngest is trembling like a leaf and talking to us non-stop, although he knows that we don't understand him. I reckon the woman can be no more than about 25. She has a narrow, hard face with a strong nose. She slowly goes ahead of us, turning sideways with every step. She wants to look at our faces, but instead stares into the barrels of our carbines, which are relentlessly driving the prisoners forward. I've already agreed with Fritz Hamann what to do next. We force the Italians further into the gorge. As no one can now see us from the road, we yell as if giving orders. Avanti, avanti, presto! These are the only words of Italian which come to mind at the moment, then fire into the air several times. The three prisoners immediately get the picture and scuttle away like rabbits. We hurry back to the rest of our unit. The shots reverberating from the mountainsides must have been proof enough to the Feldwebel that we have carried out his orders, and he doesn't mention the subject again, after we confirm that we have indeed done as we were instructed. Although we have disobeyed a direct order and the three partisans have lived to fight another day, neither of us are bothered by our consciences. On the contrary, we are glad that we could extricate ourselves from the affair so successfully. Who knows how it could have ended otherwise? The Feldwebel certainly felt that his command was an acceptable one in time of war, though I have to ask myself, would he personally have carried out the executions? In any case, Fritz Hamann, like me, is one of those people who could never kill in cold blood. Heaven forbid that I should ever become obsessed by such blind hatred that all feeling for fellow human beings is lost, and I could slaughter defenseless men and women. I tell Fritz about my meeting with Unteroffizier Schwartz, and how, at the Ritschov bridgehead, he executed wounded Russian soldiers by shooting them in the head. He explains to me that people who kill the defenseless must have sadistic leanings, and that war provides them with the excuse to satisfy this inhuman trait under the pretext of benefiting the rest of your men. After this period in Italy, we would again be fighting together in Russia for a time and would kill many of our enemies. But even though war may sometimes cause normal human beings to become insensitive, we would never slay the helpless. 10th of October. The search for partisans is over. Although we have suffered some casualties, compared to the experiences at the Russian front, this has been little more than a hunting expedition. From the Gulf of Rijeka, we drive along the coastal highway by the Adriatic Sea, with a wonderful view over the turquoise blue water, until we arrive at our destination north of Trieste. 11th October. Arrivederci Italia. Molto grazie. Many thanks for your beauty and for your wonderful ancient buildings which we admire so much. And many thanks for your sparkling sunshine, lifting the sweat out of our pores, and the sea which shone such a wonderful blue color. We all want to come back another day. Thank you for your fantastic wine, tasting exquisite and quenching our thirsts, even though our heads sometimes got a bit confused due to excessive consumption. It all fits in so wonderfully well in this sun-drenched land, with its temperamental people whose melodic voices bubble all around us like a cascading waterfall. All that remains for us now as a memory of this country, and it is a poor consolation, are a few barrels of wine and a dozen bottles of aquavit, which we managed to salvage from a ruined factory on the Dalmatian coast during the last days of our stay. This souvenir helps many of us to overcome our departure from Italy and even manages to take away gloomy thoughts about our inevitable return to the horrific situation in Russia. Word has quickly spread that an advance command unit is already on the way there. 16 October. After a few days of relaxation, during which the older company members have indulged in some really heavy drinking, we travel on to a place near Ljubljana into prepared quarters. Here we still have a chance to send packages home. I'm wrapping up a box of good wine and some sheets of soft boot leather that I just managed to snatch away from a burning leather factory. 17th October. We are loaded onto a goods train with our vehicles at the station in Ljubljana. It is cold and rainy, and we are freezing cold in our thin tropical uniforms. 19th October. We reach Vienna in the early hours of the morning, where we exchange our light uniforms for the regular army issue. Then we travel east to an unknown destination. Equivalent to Sergeant Major. Zugführer means platoon leader. A type of salt pork. Train has been rattling along towards the east for 2 days now. Those of us who are not busy writing a letter or playing cards with someone or engrossed in some other activity are perhaps like me, thinking about things. Many memories come to mind, and I ruminate about what happened last time in Russia and what might be waiting for us there now. But compared to those days, everything is different. It's not just to do with the fact that I now know what war is all about. Unlike the first time I came to Russia, full of euphoria and not expecting the terrible disillusionment that came about because of our inconsistent policies there. It has much more to do with the knowledge that I now belong to a hard-hitting combat unit with well-trained personnel and the necessary heavy weapons, which can take on the strongest enemy and overcome him. I wonder why the negative attitude that I had only a few months ago has changed so quickly into a positive one. The continuous drip-drip of propaganda, with its slogans like duty to the fatherland and an honorable contribution for a greater German Reich, has had its effect on me. I'm quite convinced that I'm fighting for a good cause. 22nd October. We were supposed to disembark today, but after a short stop, we carry on. We can hear booming and thunder all around us. We soldiers don't know anything. We can only guess where we're supposed to be going. We do know that the Russians, after their August offensive, advanced across Kharkov towards the west and are now somewhere between Kremenchug and Dnipropetrovsk. The newly reconstituted 6th Army, to which we belong, is supposed to be involved in combat in this area. A few hours later, we get down from the train onto an open stretch of track and we move off in our vehicles, in the general direction of the gunfire. We drive through arid steppe land and through cornfields not yet harvested. The debris of war lies all around us. Russian tanks and artillery pieces, as well as German weapons, providing ample evidence of the to and fro movement of combat over the last few weeks. Where is the front line? It is reported to be completely fragmented, and our Rittmeister has to feel his way forward carefully. 23 October. We take a rest at the edge of a cornfield, having dispersed the vehicles. We dismount to get circulation back in our feet. The cornfield shimmers like gold in the last rays of the setting sun. The fog is slowly rising from the ground, and I can sense the approach of the Russian winter. The shadows thrown by our vehicles become less harsh. The noise from the artillery fire in front of us becomes louder, and we can already make out tank fire to our flank. The front line is flexing like a headless snake. Although the noise of combat is far away, forward elements of the enemy may actually be behind us. This is what the pilot of a sewing machine must be thinking. Suddenly, out of a clear sky, he is rattling away right overhead. He must have come out of the hollow in front of the cornfield. We stare amazed at the Russian biplane, which skims over us, flies up in a spiral, and then, with its engine cut, dives down at us at a steep angle. Has the bloke gone nuts? The first battle after the return to the Russian inferno. Top, 24-29. October 1943, bottom, 30. October 1st, November 1943. The pilot leans right out of the cockpit and we hear him yell in a loud voice, "Ruski? Germansky?" We are speechless. Have you ever heard anything like it? The chap didn't know who it was below him, and yet he dared to fly his unreliable old crock that low. He would have come to no harm had he promptly turned round and gone away. We just gape in astonishment. It doesn't occur to us to fire at him, but the pilot is not satisfied. Because of his thick goggles and the fading light, and because he has not been shot at, he must think the figures beneath him are Ruskies. He makes a tight right-hand turn and comes in at us again at a shallow angle. This time he is greeted with a fusillade of rifle shots. The bullets penetrate the thin skin of the aircraft and hit the engine. The plane falls into the cornfield like a stone from about 30 feet and quickly bursts into fire. Men rush over to the plane and help the pilot out. First he curses like a drunken Cossack, but as he takes off his metal-rimmed goggles and recognizes us as Germanskys, he does not look amused. Then, however, he acknowledges his stupid mistake with a roar of laughter. Gefreiter Rudnick, from the Schwadronstrupp, offers him a cigarette, which he quickly lights. He has a pack of papyrosa filter tips in his pocket, and these apparently taste better because he throws away our half-smoked cigarette in favor of his own brand. "Even after the shooting you thought we were your friends, eh?" Rudnick grins at him, and relieves him of a leather case which he has around his neck containing maps and other valuable documents. Rudnick passes the case to the Rittmeister. The pilot was injured by a glancing bullet on his thigh. He is attended to by the medic and is later put on board the ambulance. In the meantime, the sun has set. On the western horizon, only a reddish strip is to be seen, and it is growing paler by the minute. "It'll be a nice day tomorrow," says Fritz Koschinski, who is the last to climb on board. We set off slowly on in the dark and drive on until a motorcycle courier, who has reconnoitered the situation in his armored reconnaissance vehicle, gives the drivers the signal to stop. There is supposed to be a village ahead of us, occupied by Russians. They are securing an MSR which leads by the village, but this is very little used. "Dismount!" The vehicles disperse and we stand and wait. I can hear our company commander asking the driver of the reconnaissance vehicle about the strength of the Russians in the village, and if there are any tanks nearby. He doesn't know. Then a motorcycle courier turns up with orders for us to remain in an assembly position until tomorrow morning, until other parts of our outfit can link up with us. Our sector will get some assault gun support in the morning. 24 October. The weather is sunny, but it is cold and windy. The entire regiment is now in the assembly area, ready for action. As we launch our attack on the village, we make our first contact with the enemy. It is different for me this time compared to Kalach. Here we are the stronger side, and we are able to drive the enemy back. This certainly gives a lift to the ordinary soldier. The village wasn't heavily manned and the road wasn't used much. However, we capture a lot of weapons, and these are blown up by our engineers. About 60 prisoners are taken and are sent to the rear. The front is here quite confusing. In many places, Russian tanks have already broken through German lines and are now behind us. 29 October. We drive out of Novaya Praga at daybreak and arrive at our armored units during the morning. With them, we attack the enemy. During our attack, we are constantly bombarded by artillery and Stahlenorgeln. We suffer casualties and must constantly dig ourselves in. A fellow in our unit, Heinz Barrage, one of our ammunition carriers, is severely wounded in the head, and shortly afterwards our Italian volunteer, whom we call Marco, has his shoulder ripped open by shrapnel. Kilometer after kilometer we push the enemy back, and when it gets dark, some of us soldiers, including me, suddenly find ourselves in the middle of some men who start talking to us in Russian. There are 10 of them, and in the darkness they have been unable to retreat quickly enough. They surrender without a fight. We continue to advance with the tanks in the darkness, stopping now and then, dismounting and continuing on foot. We have strict orders from the squadron chef that at each long stop we are to dig ourselves in. Fritz Koschinski, who belongs to our group, has got hold of a long-handled shovel from one of the vehicles, enabling us to dig a hole in the ground much more quickly than with the small folding field shovels. During our advance, there are quite a number of these stops. I reckon that in the last few days I have dug more holes in Russian soil than I have ever dug in my entire life in our garden at home. I've got burst blisters on my hands, and I curse this confounded digging on more than one occasion. But I appreciate how important it is to have a foxhole when we find ourselves in the open fields during an artillery barrage, or if we are surprised by Soviet aircraft. 30th October. Today we are attacking the enemy west of the river Ingulez, near Ternovatka. In spite of heavy enemy fire, we succeed, with the help of other companies and an anti-tank gun platoon, to establish a small bridgehead on the east side of the river. At the start of the action, we lose a 20mm anti-aircraft gun and a tank destroyer to tank fire. Both vehicles are completely burnt out. The AAG crew are dead, and the tank destroyer personnel have severe burns all over their bodies. Notwithstanding the darkness, our Rittmeister wants to reconnoiter the small village of Nedaivoda forward of our position. A reconnaissance platoon reports that the houses in the village are in rows either side of a small stream. In the village itself, they have detected only light enemy units, although alongside a hedge they have discovered a T-34 securing one of the streets, which is not much used. "Good, we'll get the tank first," I hear our chief say. Our vehicles remain under cover while we advance toward the village in small groups. The Schwadronstrupp, with our Rittmeister in front, is accompanied by a 75mm self-propelled anti-tank gun. We creep forward very carefully, and when the guide gives the signal, the engine of the ATG is immediately cut. The closer we get to the tank, the more circumspect we are. We can often hear low engine noises and every now and then hushed calls in the night. Gingerly, we feel our way forward. The engine on the ATG runs quietly and the tracks move easily over the ground. It is almost completely dark, but every now and then the area is bathed in pale moonlight as the clouds waft across the sky. In front of us, we can see the shadows of the bushes and houses. Orders are whispered. We fan out in a line. Keep in touch. Advance slowly and more carefully. We have time. Orders from the Rittmeister. The ATG is now advancing at a snail's pace. There, in front of us, is the hedge. The tank is supposed to be standing there somewhere. If we are spotted, we will have lost the element of surprise and he will open fire on us at point-blank range. We advance along the hedge very carefully. The twigs snag on our ammunition pouches, and we stop immediately and melt into the shadows of the hedge. The ATG edges forward a yard at a time. Where is the tank? As if in answer, a diesel engine suddenly starts up. The noise comes from the right, in front of us. There, where the hedge makes an angle with the houses and the street curves away. Has he discovered us? The excitement frays our nerves. If a flare goes up, the excitement is over, but then all hell will break loose. We hold our breath and the ATG cuts its engine, but the gunner cranks down the barrel and swings it over to aim it at the spot where the diesel engine noise came from. We soldiers press ourselves flat on the ground and stare into the darkness. The tank noise sounds loud and nervous, but nothing happens. We have to move closer, I hear the Rittmeister whisper. He can't hear us because of his engine. The ATG moves ahead very carefully, its crew ready to open up at a second's notice. We walk along bent double in the cover of the houses. Then suddenly the tank engine is cut. The ATG immediately does likewise. It is so nerve-wracking. The Russian tank crew is probably staring into the darkness just like us, uncertain exactly what to do. It's probably not a good idea to send up a flare with the enemy right under their noses. The best thing would be to get away out of here as quickly as possible so as to gain a little distance. That must have been what the tank crew were thinking when they discovered us, because at that point the engine roars into life and we can hear the tracks move across the ground. Our eyes have got so used to the darkness that we can clearly see the outline of the vehicle. Just as the recce unit reported, it had been sitting right by the hedge, and it is now moving away under cover of the bushes. The ATG gunner aims at the dark mass. The moon appears again, causing the matte silver gun barrel to glint. "Ready?" A voice breaks the tension. There is a dull report, and a bolt of white lightning streaks through the night, bathing everything around us in brightness. Blinded, we look at the T-34, which is no more than 30 meters away and broadside on. Along the hedge, we see some figures running for cover. A shot rends the air, and the almost instantaneous explosion of the ATG round tears a hole the size of a man's fist in the side of the tank. Seconds later, another round finds the target, and in the light of a tracer, we see black smoke billowing out of the tank's turret hatch. The hatch is ripped open, and, holding one hand against a bleeding head wound, a Russian jumps out and hurries down to the stream. We are lying in the hedge firing at the Russians, who appear between the houses and fire back at us, but within a short time we have either inflicted casualties or forced the enemy to flee. We don't have time to search through all the houses, but instead we take up our positions in front of the village, which we assume the enemy will make an effort to retake. 31st October. During the next few hours, a hard and bitter firefight develops, but we are able to hold the enemy back. Our ATG destroys 5 T-34s. Later, another 7 are captured, having run out of fuel and been abandoned by their crews. The enemy infantry push back, have dug in only a few hundred meters from our positions, but most of them can avoid our fire by staying hidden in a hollow just 100 meters away. We selected this hillock at the edge of the village for our HMGs because of the excellent view it commands, but there is this shallow depression with tall grass growing in it, offering concealment. It is also impossible for us to control the banks of the stream to the right of us, where our light platoons are stationed, because of the bushes there. As a result, the enemy attack from the bank of the stream comes as a surprise. We get our first sight of the attackers when their earth-colored helmets appear out of the shallow depression. The first waves are mown down by the murderous fire from our 2 heavy machine guns, and those behind now fall back down into the hollow. And then something happens that makes our hair stand on end. We witness, firsthand and close-up, the inhuman treatment meted out to Soviet soldiers by their leaders, and we have real sympathy for the poor devils. Because of the firepower from our two MG-42s, at a range of about 50 meters, the attackers have little chance of getting out of the hollow, and certainly none at all of storming up the hillock to our positions. We have heard how the commissar forces his men forward with a shrill whistle, as if he were controlling a pack of mad dogs. We fire as soon as we can see their torsos. Anyone who manages to come up over the edge of the hollow can't get further than 1 or at best 2 paces forward before he is hit. Those who fall back still alive are cursed and sworn at as if they were animals. Is this Russian commissar or officer crazy? Or is he only worried about his own life and is therefore sacrificing his men? It can't have escaped his notice that he is caught in a trap and that when daylight comes that he'll have no chance to get away. Does he intend to sacrifice his troops until evening comes, to tie us down so that he can secretly make a getaway under the cover of darkness? But the death that awaits him, and unfortunately also the other poor devils, is worse than death from a bullet. The tanks move up, 2 of them on the right flank peeling off from the others and moving towards the hollow. I note their fat barrels, which, unlike the other tank guns, are pointed down towards the ground. Fritz Koshinsky knows his equipment. "Flamethrowers," he says in a voice so loud that we can all hear him. I've heard about their effect, and my spine starts to shiver. I wouldn't like to be one of those chaps in the hollow, and the crazy bastard will probably lose the whistle he keeps blowing. There is now no chance of anyone getting out of the hollow alive. I ask myself if the slavish obedience of the Russian soldiers goes so far, even in this situation, as to prevent them from liquidating an inhuman superior officer. Even before the flamethrower has disappeared into the hollow, we can see the long jet of flame as it spews out of the barrel and burns everything in its path to a crisp. Panic erupts in the hollow. We can hear all the yelling, and with the thick black smoke comes an unbelievable stench of burnt flesh and clothing. Some of the men are running up and out of the hollow, crying in a blaze. Panic-stricken, they run past us and throw themselves on the ground, rolling over and over. Many have jumped into the stream in order to save themselves. The heat is so intense that we can feel it from here. It is a truly terrible sight. We climb out of our foxholes and follow the advancing tanks. We have to go on. The destruction of the enemy has not been accomplished yet. After a kilometer, we receive strong counterfire. The enemy has dug himself in. When we're unable to advance any further, 4 more flamethrower tanks attack from the flank. This is a terrible weapon. I'm experiencing its destructive power for the first time, and I won't easily forget the terrible stench that takes my breath away and threatens to suffocate me. 1st November. We have many dead and wounded in our unit on this day. Later, our successful engagement for the bridgehead near Ternovatka will be mentioned in the German Army Rolls of Honor, under the name of our Rittmeister. This kind of special award is used to try and get units motivated. 2 in November. We are traveling at high speed to a new sector. We, the ordinary soldiers, are left in ignorance as usual, but rumor has it that we are making for a bridgehead on the Dnieper. We drive through the night and freeze on board the trucks. For the last 2 days it has been freezing during the night and raining during the day, and the awful strong wind blows right through our limbs. The ground is muddy and the vehicles frequently get bogged down to their sleeves. When we board the trucks after we have helped to heave them out of the mud, the sticky black Ukrainian clay clings to our boots and our uniforms. Finally, we stop in a village and move into quarters, where we receive new felt boots and padded camouflage suits for the winter that is imminent. 5th of November. We are back in a defensive position around a large market town called Werchny Rogashik. The main battle line is supposed to be quite near. We can hear gunfire and other noises of battle in the distance. We are told that the Russians have broken through our lines on a wide front. Our regiment, with the support of artillery and tanks, is supposed to attack in the early morning hours to try to re-establish the old front line. 6 November. Following a prolonged bombardment by heavy and medium artillery, we advance on a wide front against the enemy. The Soviets greet us with a huge defensive barrage. As the sun gets up, it blinds our tank gunners, so that they frequently have to stop and have a lot of problems getting the targets in their sights. It develops into a murderous attack with high casualties in both officers and men. We have many dead. Right beside me, an Unteroffizier has his head blown off by an artillery shell. A grenade splinter rips open the ammunition drum mounted on my machine gun. In spite of our heavy losses, we manage to break through the Russian defenses and drive the enemy fleeing before us. The flamethrower tanks take over the task of mopping up the resistance in the foxholes and trenches. They leave behind a desolate and singed landscape, from which for hours a stinking cloud of smoke rises to pollute the air. This merges with the moving white clouds in the sky, carrying the remains of the burnt corpses over a wide tract of the endless countryside. Just as we think we might be able to take things a bit easy today, the Russians counterattack. They take us by surprise with a devastating barrage from their Stalin organ and field howitzers. Again, we suffer a great number of casualties, but as we in the meantime have been backed up by yet another section of Hornisse heavy tank destroyers, and in addition some Hummels with their 150mm howitzers, the enemy has no chance of breaking through in our sector. At about this time, our Stukas start to attack the enemy's assembly areas, and we see the clouds of black smoke rising into the sky, indicating that they have hit their targets. After we've mopped up the old frontline positions, the 79th Infantry Division reoccupy their previous positions. Tonight we move on to a new sector, this time near Verkhny Rogatchik again. The Russian defenses are weak here. We're told later that we have defeated a Russian Guards artillery division with their guns and other heavy weapons, and have also caused heavy casualties in men and equipment among 2 further Guards divisions. But our victory has cost us dear. There are more than 20 dead in our section alone, and for our regiment, the total losses amount to the strength of an entire company, about 155 men. Along with the many soldiers, Unteroffiziere and Wachtmeister, there were also a number of officers killed, among them the commanders of the 1st and 2nd Battalions and 3 company commanders. In our heavy weapons platoon, we lost 1 mortar and 1 heavy machine gun section. To everyone's regret, and to our rage, our beloved Unteroffizier Faber was killed by a pistol bullet in his back, fired by a Bolshevik officer who was lying wounded on the ground and whom he had just bandaged. It made me think of Unteroffizier Schwartz, who at the bridgehead near Ritschov had done this sort of thing, which I reckoned was inhuman. This time I was not so much concerned, as a Wachtmeister from one of the light platoons shot the bastard with a burst from his submachine gun. God prevent my anger developing into such an intense hatred that I will ever become like Schwartz. 7 November. Days later we miss our highly respected Rittmeister, who could always be found in the very first of our front lines. Our Zugführer tells us that he has been ordered by higher command to take over the decimated battalion, and we are to get another company commander. In the meantime, word has spread that we are, with the entire division, now at the strategically important bridgehead of Nikopol on the Dnieper. The weather has changed. Although it is freezing throughout the night, during the morning it begins to rain. The ground has become nothing but slime. Even tracked vehicles have problems trying to make it through. Most of the time, we wade through the sludge pushing our vehicles. After hours of exhausting work, we reach Dnyaprovka, a large village at the eastern end of the bridgehead. We are soaked through and completely covered in mud and slime. The staffs of an infantry division and a mountain infantry unit are supposed to be stationed in the village, and their fighting elements are reported to be dug in along the MBL, defending it against a continually attacking enemy. 8 November. We occupy the quarters relinquished by the men of an army tank unit. Our unit moves into a roomy wooden house which we call a Panjay hut. Here we find a Russian woman living with her 18-year-old daughter Katya. Both live in the front room with the great clay oven, on which, according to Russian custom, both women have their beds. All of us soldiers move into the next room, which is large and is also heated by the clay oven. Outside it is clammy and raw cold, and before we clean up after the other occupants, we stoke up the oven.